The first time I read those messages out loud, I wasn't in my kitchen. I was standing under the yellow lights at the VFW hall in Cedar Rapids, holding a manila folder in front of my wife's whole family. The room smelled like chilly old coffee and cheap beer. A birthday banner for my mother-in-law sagged over the dance floor. Folding chairs squeaked. Somewhere a kid dropped a plastic fork, and there I was, a 58-year-old HVAC guy reading, "I can't stop thinking about last Friday in your car. I miss your smile more than I should." Nobody laughed. Linda stared at me like I'd ripped the roof off the building. Her coworker Mark Jensen tried to disappear into his chair. Every eye swung from me to them and back again. That was the night everything came out. But it started 2 weeks earlier on a Tuesday in our cramped kitchen on Edgewood Road, while I was standing over a skillet of pork chops and wondering if I'd put too much oil in the pan. Linda was in the shower. I could hear the water running down the hall, the old pipes rattling like they always had. Steam drifted out of the open bathroom door, carrying the faint, sweet scent of her lilac soap into the kitchen. It mixed with the smell of frying meat and onions and the low murmur of the evening news on the TV, and for a moment I remember thinking, this is just an ordinary night. Then her phone buzzed on the counter. It lay next to the salt shaker face up in a scuffed faux leather case. At our age, most texts are from kids' doctors or pharmacies. I figured it was our daughter in Des Moines or our son in Marion. The screen lit up. "I miss your smile." I wiped my fingers on a dish towel and picked it up. The bathroom fan hummed. The shower kept running. Steam curled through the doorway like nothing was wrong. I tapped the message open. "I miss your smile," it said again, with a little heart at the end. The name at the top read Mark J. Work. I'd met Mark once at a Christmas party at First River Credit Union where Linda worked. Younger than us, firm handshake, big grin, haircut you pay too much for. Called me sir, talked about interest rates like ball scores. For a few seconds, I tried to give it a generous reading. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe office banter. Maybe I was being dramatic. Then the phone buzzed again. "I can't stop thinking about last Friday in your car." Friday night, she told me she was staying late to close out month-end reports. I'd eaten leftover meatloaf alone at the table and fallen asleep in my recliner with the Hallmark channel on. Now my stomach dropped so hard it made me lightheaded. My hands started to shake. Not wild shaking, just a fine tremor, like when you try to thread a needle and realize you're not 30 anymore. I set the spatula down so I didn't splash hot oil everywhere. Hurt came first, sharp and stupid. Anger came right behind it. I could see myself marching down the hall, yanking the bathroom door open, shoving the phone in her face while the water beat down on both of us. Instead, something else slid in. A cold, focused calm, the same feeling I get when I'm staring at a dead furnace in January. You can panic or you can flip the switch to manual and work the problem. I stood there breathing lilac and pork fat and argued with myself. Don't do anything stupid, Tom. You don't know what you're walking into. You don't know what he'll do. You don't even know what you'll do. Another part of me answered back. You saw enough. My thumb slid over the keyboard. I read the last message again. "I can't stop thinking about last Friday in your car." I answered, pretending to be her. "Come over," I typed. "My husband isn't home today." I hovered over the send button. If I sent it, there was no undo. If I didn't, I'd be back where I started, standing in my kitchen, pretending I hadn't seen what I'd seen. I hit send. The message whooshed off into whatever tower carries secrets around Cedar Rapids. I put the phone back where it had been, screen down this time. The shower was still running. The furnace kicked on in the basement with a low rumble. Grease popped in the pan and stung my wrist. For a moment, I just listened to my own house like it belonged to somebody else. The reply came quicker than I wanted. "How soon?" My mouth went dry. I typed whenever. "I'll be in the shower for a while." The little typing bubbles blinked, disappeared, came back. "Give me 20, he wrote. Then another line, "I miss you." I almost laughed. 20 minutes. That was all it took to measure how much respect this man had for my marriage. How much respect my wife did. I turned the burner down, covered the skillet, and set the fork aside. My hands were still shaking, but now it was from holding everything in. Every part of me wanted to explode, to fling the phone into the sink, to pound on the bathroom door, and demand answers with soap in her hair. I didn't. Instead, I walked to the living room, clicked the TV off, and stood at the front window looking out at our quiet street. The winter sky over Cedar Rapids was flat and gray. A neighbor hauled groceries from their truck. Nothing looked different, and yet everything had changed. The shower shut off. Pipes rattled. A moment later, I heard the bathroom door open and Linda's bare feet on the hallway carpet. She hummed a little under her breath, the same tune she always did when she felt good about herself. I'd loved that sound once. She walked into the kitchen in her robe, steam trailing her, and smiled like nothing in the world was wrong. "Smells good," she said. "Is that the pork chops from Fairway?" "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded normal. "That scared me. Should be ready soon." She kissed my cheek, quick and automatic, and reached for her phone. I watched her face when the screen lit, saw the color drain just a shade. Her eyes flicked up to me, then back down. Her thumb started moving too fast, like she could shove everything back into the dark if she just typed fast enough. Before either of us could speak, the doorbell rang. The sound of it went through me like a nail. Linda froze. Her fingers tightened around the phone. For a second, she looked like she might be sick right there on the linoleum. "I'll get it," I said. I wiped my hands on the dish towel again, even though they were dry, and walked down the hall toward the front door. My heart pounded hard enough to hurt. I didn't know exactly what I was going to say or do. I only knew I wasn't going to pretend this hadn't happened. I put my hand on the knob, took a breath, and opened the door to see who exactly missed my wife's smile enough to show up at my house on a Tuesday night. Linda stood behind me in the hallway, frozen in her robe, dripping water onto the carpet. I could hear her breathing short, shallow pulls of air, like someone trying not to choke. She didn't say a word. Neither did I. The only sound was the furnace humming behind us, and the faint squeal of tires as a car pulled away. I shut the door slowly, not slamming it, just easing it closed until the latch clicked. That tiny sound felt louder than a gunshot. When I finally turned, Linda took a half step back, clutching her phone to her chest. "Tom," she whispered, What did you do?" I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to shout, to demand explanations, to spill every ounce of hurt boiling under my ribs. But something inside me refused to hand her that power. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "I think you already know," I said. Her eyes darted down, then toward the door, then back at me. "You don't understand. He was just, it's not what—" "Linda," I said, holding up a hand, "don't." She shut her mouth like the word itself had slapped her. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The house felt too small for both of us, too full of lies to breathe in comfortably. She wrapped her robe tighter, like she was cold, but the heat was running. I could feel it on my face. Finally, she found her voice. "Why would you text him? Why would you trick him like that?" I almost laughed. "Trick him, Linda? He thought you invited him." He didn't hesitate, not even for a second. Her face twisted with panic. "It's not like that. You're twisting it. We were just talking. It wasn't—" "Linda," I said again, softer this time, "stop lying. I saw the messages." She froze completely, like her brain hit a wall and had nowhere left to go. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry yet. She just looked at me with this mix of guilt and fear, and something else, maybe calculation, like she was testing which approach might save her. "Tom, I'm sorry," she whispered. Those words hurt more than the messages. They came too fast, too easy. An apology should collapse under its own weight. Hers floated. I walked past her toward the kitchen. I didn't want to look at her, didn't want to breathe the same air. The pork chops were overcooked, now edges curling in the pan. I turned off the stove, lifted the skillet, and set it in the sink. Behind me, Linda hovered in the doorway. "Can we just talk?" she said. "Please." About what, I asked without turning around. Which part? Friday? The text messages, how long it's been going on. She flinched, maybe even winced. "Tom, I made a mistake." I finally turned to face her. "One message is a mistake," I said. "A whole conversation is a decision." Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. For the first time that night, I let myself really see her hair-damp robe, tied crooked mascara, smudged under one eye from the shower steam. She looked younger than usual, but not in a flattering way. More like someone caught in the middle of something they'd never expected to answer for. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she whispered. "How far did it go?" I asked. She blinked fast, once, twice. "Tom." "How long?" I said. "Tell me the truth for once." Silence stretched between us. She looked down at her hands. She rubbed her thumb over the edge of her phone. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. "A few months." I didn't answer. Couldn't. A few months. Not a momentary slip, not one night, not a misunderstanding. Months. I walked past her again, heading down the hall toward the living room. I needed space. I needed air that didn't taste like betrayal. She followed me, wrapping her arms around herself. "Where are you going?" she asked. "To sit down," I said, "to think." "About what?" I shot her a tired look. "About whether we've been married 30 years or whether I've just been keeping you comfortable while you tried out something newer." She stopped in the hallway, hand covering her mouth like the words physically hit her. For a second, I thought she might collapse. I sat on the recliner, elbows on my knees, head in my hands. My heart thumped in my ears, heavy and uneven. I wasn't angry anymore, not the loud kind, just hollow, like something had carved out the inside of my chest. Linda stood in the doorway staring at me. "Tom, please say something. Yell at me if you have to. Just don't sit there like that." "I don't want to yell," I said. "I don't want to be like that. I just want the truth." "I told you the truth," she whispered. "No," I said, looking up at her. "You told me the minimum amount you thought might save you." She opened her mouth closed. It opened it again, then turned away, wiping her cheek with the back of her hand. That night, she slept in the guest room. I heard her crying behind the door, quiet but constant. And instead of comforting her like I did for decades, I sat at our old desktop computer, opened a blank document, and started writing everything down, times, dates, details. Not because revenge was easy, but because I knew it was going to be hard. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those messages again, little glowing pieces of a life I didn't know my wife was living. Around 2 a.m, I gave up pretending and went to sit at the kitchen table with a cup of leftover coffee I reheated in the microwave. The house sounded different now, too quiet, too aware of itself, like it knew something had cracked in its walls. Around 7, Linda left for work without saying much. She hovered in the doorway before she went, her purse hanging off her shoulder like a weight. "Can we talk later?" she asked, her voice small. "Maybe," I said. She left. The door shut. The silence that followed felt final. I stared at the laptop she'd left in the living room. It wasn't locked. She'd never bothered. I didn't want to open it. I didn't want to be the man who dug around in his wife's files like some jealous teenager. But I also wasn't going to be the man who stuck his head in the sand. I carried it to the kitchen table and flipped it open. For a moment, all I saw was her screensaver, our kids at a lake in Wisconsin 20 years ago. 2 laughing teenagers who still believed their parents' marriage meant something solid. I clicked into her Gmail. There they were. Dozens of messages, some long, some short, some innocent looking, but knowing what I knew, every line felt sharp. I started reading. "Thanks for last night. I needed that. I can't stop thinking about you in that red sweater. You looked amazing. I wish you didn't have to go home so early. And the one that made my breath leave my body. Someday we won't have to hide." Someday. My stomach twisted. I clicked their shared Google Calendar next. Friday nights blocked out as late shift closing report. Tuesday lunches marked team training. A handful of Saturdays labeled errands, which I now saw were anything but. Each discovery was a punch. Each timestamp a heartbeat saying you weren't crazy, you weren't paranoid, you were right not to trust the silence. I sat back staring at the screen. Hurt and anger churned together, but underneath them something steadier began to form. A plan, not out of impulse, not out of rage, but from a place of cold clarity. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to throw her out. I wasn't going to get arrested for making a stupid choice in the heat of the moment. I was going to make sure the truth came out in a way nobody could spin. But first I needed advice. I drove downtown to see an attorney, Evelyn Brooks, divorce specialist, small brick office near the Lynn County Courthouse. Her receptionist, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a silver chain, gave me a sympathetic look as she handed me a clipboard. Evelyn herself was calm and direct. "Take your time," she said. "Tell me what you found." I told her everything. The messages, the shower, the doorbell, the look on Linda's face. Evelyn listened without flinching, nodding slowly like she'd heard a version of this story more times than she wished. When I was done, she folded her hands. "Tom, I know you're hurting, but you're thinking clearly, and that's good. You need to stay that way." I nodded. "You need documentation," she said. "Screenshots, emails, dates, anything that establishes a pattern. Don't confront him again. Don't threaten anyone. Don't make a scene. Just collect the truth." "That's it?" I asked. "Just collect?" Just collect, she repeated. Then decide what you want your life to look like. Her words stuck with me the whole drive home. By the time I pulled back into our driveway on Edgewood Road, an idea had formed, something sharp but legal, painful but honest. Not revenge for the sake of cruelty, revenge for the sake of clarity. Linda's mother, Carol, was turning 70 in 2 weeks. Her birthday party would be at VFW Post 788. The whole family would be there. Some of Linda's co-workers too. Their pastor, friends from church, people who'd known us for decades. Linda wanted everything to look perfect that night. All I intended to do was show what was already true. But even as the plan settled in my mind, I felt guilty, heavy, like I was betraying something sacred by even considering it. Then I remembered the messages, the calendar entries, the way Linda had lied with a straight face for months. If she was willing to risk our marriage in secret, then I had the right to end the secret. I spent the next day collecting everything carefully. I didn't just print screenshots, I arranged them like a professional report. Date at the top, context beneath, clean margins, straight cuts. My hands only shook once, and even then I forced them steady. Around midnight, I slid the final page into a plain manila folder. No labels, no decoration. Simple, direct. Just like the truth itself. But that didn't mean it was easy. I sat at the table with the folder in front of me, staring at it like it was a loaded weapon. Part of me wanted to shove it in a drawer. Burn it. Pretend none of this was happening. Pretend the betrayal wasn't real. But the truth stayed heavy in my chest. When Linda came home from work that night, she stood in the doorway like she was afraid to enter our own house. "Tom," she said softly, "can we talk?" I looked at her, really looked. The woman I built a life with. The woman who once squeezed my hand at our kids' school plays. The woman who somewhere along the way forgot I was enough. "Not yet," I said. For a moment she looked relieved, like not yet meant maybe later, maybe I'll forgive you. She didn't know what was sitting on the table between us. And she didn't know how close I came in that moment to throwing the whole plan away, to letting her tears soften me, to letting myself believe we could patch over holes this deep. But I didn't. Because deep down, I knew something. Starting over was going to be hard, but staying would have been harder. I didn't expect the VFW hall to feel so small. On the drive over, I kept telling myself I was ready. I had the folder tucked under my arm, my shirt ironed, my breathing steady. But the second I stepped inside into the warm, noisy, chili-scented air of VFW Post 788, a wave of doubt hit me so hard I almost turned around and walked back to my truck. People were everywhere. Kids running between folding chairs, men in veteran caps standing around crockpots, women arranging plastic tablecloths and paper plates. Someone had set out a big cake with Happy 70th Carol in pink frosting. This wasn't some faceless crowd. These were people who had known Linda and me for 30 years. People who sent us casseroles when our son broke his leg. People who hugged us at church. People who thought we were solid. And suddenly I felt like an intruder in my own life. Linda saw me walk in and hesitated mid-step, like her brain didn't know how to process me being there. Her smile flickered on polite and brittle. "Tom," she said, smoothing her dress. "You made it." "Yeah," I said, didn't want to miss Carol's big night. Her eyes dropped briefly to the manila folder. She blanched, just a bit. Not enough for anyone else to notice. But I saw it. "Tom, maybe we should..." "Later," I said. "This is your mom's night. Let's not make a scene." It was the truth, and also not the truth. I didn't come here to cause chaos. I came here because chaos had already been living in my house for months, and it was time everyone saw it. But that didn't mean I wasn't scared. I stood at the edge of the room watching people laugh and chat, paper cups filled with beer or weak punch. The fluorescent lights hummed. The American flag in the corner drooped over the wooden podium. The crock pot smelled like chili smoked sausage, and old coffee burned into the bottom of a percolator. My palms were sweating. My heartbeat tapped against my ribs in a fast, uneven rhythm. "What are you doing, Tom?" a voice in my head whispered. "This isn't you. You don't humiliate people. You don't drag private matters into public." Maybe it was right. Maybe I should have pulled Linda aside, handed her the folder, and left. No spectacle, no audience, just a clean break. Then I saw him, Mark Jensen, standing by the dessert table in a button-down shirt like he belonged there, laughing with Linda's cousin, eating cake. Not a single sign of shame on him. Something inside me solidified. He wasn't suffering. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't even nervous. He was comfortable. And in that moment, my fear turned into purpose. Not rage purpose. Linda's mother, Carol, made her way to me smiling wide, wearing a bright blue blouse. She hugged me. "Tommy, I'm so glad you're here." I hugged her back. Wouldn't miss it. She smelled like lavender and the kind of drugstore lotion she'd used my entire marriage. The more I looked around, the clearer everything became. These people weren't strangers to the truth. They deserved to know it. Linda had woven them into a story that wasn't real, a story where she was faithful, a story where I was oblivious. If she didn't respect the life we built, the least I could do was respect the people in it by not letting them live in a lie. When dinner wound down, chatter softened. Coffee refills slowed. Paper plates started piling up near the trash cans. Someone's country playlist hummed under the noise. That was my moment. I walked toward the podium. My legs felt heavy, stiff. Halfway there, doubt hit me again, sharp and sudden. I wasn't a dramatic man. I didn't like attention. I didn't want pity or applause or whispering. I just wanted the truth. I tapped a spoon against a plastic cup. Ting, ting, ting. The room quieted. A few people turned their chairs. Someone told their kids to sit down. Linda froze by the drink table. Mark set his fork down carefully like he wanted to melt into his chair. "Evening, folks," I said, clearing my throat. "I won't take much of your time." My voice shook on the first sentence. Not a lot, but enough that I heard it. Enough that I had to swallow hard before continuing. "We're all here to celebrate Carol tonight. 70 years, that's something worth showing up for." People murmured agreement. I looked at Carol, then back at the room. "I also want to talk about honesty. The kind we owe to the people who love us, the people who trust us." My hands were shaking again, that same fine tremor. I steadied the folder against the podium. "Linda and I have been married 30 years, I said, and I thought I owed it to the people who know us to share something I've recently learned." I opened the folder. Linda gasped. It wasn't loud, but in the silent room it was sharp as a knife. I read the first message. "I miss your smile." A ripple went through the crowd. Linda stepped forward. "Tom, please don't. Please don't." I kept reading. "I can't stop thinking about last Friday in your car." Someone uttered, "Oh my God." I read the timestamps, the dates, the lunches, the Friday nights. I kept my voice level steady, the way I explain a broken furnace to a customer. Mark's face turned ghost white. He stood abruptly, but before he could bolt Frank from accounting, who happened to be standing right behind him, put a firm hand on his shoulder. "Sit down," Frank said quietly. "You ought to hear this." Linda covered her mouth with both hands, eyes full of tears. She hadn't cried when she needed to. I closed the folder. "This isn't about revenge," I said, though my voice cracked. "It's about clarity. If you want to know what happened in my marriage, now you do. And if you've ever wondered whether silence is easier than truth, take it from me, it isn't." The room held its breath. I stepped away from the podium, picked up the folder, and passed by the food table. Carol, bless her heart, reached out and touched my arm. Her eyes were wet. "Tom," she whispered, "I'm so sorry." I leaned toward her and said softly, "Happy birthday, Carol." I needed to do this before I could celebrate anything else. Then I walked out of the VFW hall into the cold Iowa night, my breath fogging the air, my hands still shaking, but for the first time in months, my heart steady. I sat in my truck outside the VFW hall for a long while with the engine off, watching my breath fog the windshield. The lights from the building spilled onto the snow-dusted parking lot, yellow and shaky like the world inside was still trembling from what had just happened. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They felt empty instead, like everything I'd been holding in for months had finally lifted, leaving behind a quiet that didn't hurt. I didn't go home that night. Didn't want to. The house felt contaminated somehow, soaked through with the kind of silence that pretends to be normal until you know what's underneath it. So I drove to Marion, to my son Ryan's place. He opened the door in sweatpants and a Cedar Rapids Colonel's hoodie. "Dad," he said, confused, "it's late." "I know," I said. "Can I stay a few days?" He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. He just stepped aside and let me in. His basement became my room after that. An old sectional couch, the hum of a mini fridge, a lamp that flickered if you breathed on it wrong. I slept better down there than I had in months. The next morning, the whole town felt different. Or maybe I did. I drove to Casey's for a cup of burnt coffee and one of those breakfast sandwiches that are always either too dry or too greasy. The clerk, a guy around my age, nodded at me like he always did, unaware that my life had cracked open 12 hours earlier. I sat in my truck with the coffee, warming my hands, and watched the sun creep across the Cedar Rapids skyline. The snow on the curb turned gold. A school bus honked somewhere. Life kept moving. When I finally checked my phone, I had 4 voicemails from Linda, all short. "Please call me. Tom, please. I'm so sorry. We can fix this." I listened to all of them. I didn't call back. Around noon, she sent a long text. Apologies, explanations, promises, none of which changed what had happened. I read it twice just to be sure. Then I left it unanswered. That afternoon, I met again with Evelyn Brooks, the attorney. Her office smelled like old paper and lemon cleaner. "You did what you needed to do," she said, simply sliding a stack of paperwork toward me. "And now we deal with the rest. Divorce papers, asset lists, next steps." None of it felt good, but none of it felt bad either. It just felt necessary. When I left her office, the wind off the Cedar River cut cold across my face. I walked along the river path for a while, hands deep in my jacket pockets, watching geese float by like they owned the place. I tried to figure out what I was feeling. It wasn't triumph. There was no victory in exposing something that should have never existed. It wasn't bitterness either. I'd been too tired for bitterness for a long time. Mostly it was relief. Relief that I wasn't crazy. Relief that my instincts weren't wrong. Relief that I finally stopped pretending everything was fine. Starting over at 58 wasn't something I ever thought I'd be doing. When you're young, you assume the big heartbreaks happen early. You don't imagine sitting in a basement at an age when your knees crack every time you stand up, wondering what comes next. But there I was. And strangely, it didn't scare me as much as I thought it would. A few days later, Linda and I met at a neutral place, a booth at the Village Inn on First Avenue. She cried before she even sat down. She reached for my hands. I kept them folded in my lap. "I miss you," she said. "You miss what we used to be," I told her gently. "Not what we are now." She cried harder. For years, I would have given anything to fix things for her. But sitting across from her that morning with the smell of coffee and pancakes drifting around us, I realized something important. You can't repair trust by pretending the cracks aren't real. And I wasn't going to spend whatever years I had left pretending. When we stood up to leave, she hugged me. I let her because 30 years of history doesn't disappear overnight. But when she whispered, "Tom, please come home," I stepped back. "I don't think that's home anymore," I said. She nodded through her tears. And that was the closest thing to closure we were going to get. The days that followed were slow but steady, quiet mornings, with cheap coffee walks by the river, long talks with Ryan. I fixed a few things around his house, helped him patch drywall, cooked dinner once or twice, felt useful again. Some evenings I'd sit outside watching the sky darken over the neighborhood, thinking about how strange life is, how it can fall apart and still keep going, how a man can lose everything he thought was certain and somehow breathe easier afterward. One night Ryan sat beside me on the back steps. "You doing okay, Dad?" he asked. I thought about it. "I'm getting there," I said. He nodded. "That's enough." And he was right. Nobody bounces back overnight. Nobody heals on a schedule. But step by step, breath by breath, it gets lighter. And maybe that's the point. If you're listening to this, if something in my story feels familiar, let me tell you something I wish someone had told me. You're never too old to stand up for yourself. You're never too far gone to start again. And you're never as alone as you think. If my story meant something to you, if it reminded you of your own strength, if it helped you feel understood for even a few minutes, I hope you'll stick around. I share stories like this because folks our age deserve to be heard too. And if you want more stories of truth, second chances, and people finding their way through the hard parts of life, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Don't scroll past. Don't say, "Maybe later." Subscribe now so you don't miss the next chapter, because somebody's story might be the reminder you need tomorrow.